Jane Foster has joined the members of Fallen Warriors of Asgard as she sacrificed herself fighting the Mangog. What does her trip to Valhalla look like? What's up, everybody? I'm Stan, and welcome to Detail Comics, where we go over comics in detail. This is an iRate review, a show where I go over a comic book, its story, its art, give you my impressions, and let you know whether it's something you should go back to the comic book shop for or not. Make sure you subscribe to get more of these every single week. The comic I want to talk about is The Mighty Thor number 706, which is the conclusion of Jane Foster's arc as the Mighty Thor. So she sacrificed herself in the battle with the Mangog, destroying Mjolnir, or at least Mjolnir self-destructing in some kind of capacity, and she has found herself at the gates of Valhalla, ready to enter into the Warrior's Garden. But is that all of the story? Let's dive in and see what's up. This is the moment that almost everyone has been waiting for, the end of Jane Foster's run as the Mighty Thor in Mighty Thor number 706, but it opens up in a relatively different way. On the moon, we actually see Freya and Odin, we see Sif and Heimdall, they're all calling out, saying that Jane Foster is dead as we see her body lying on the surface of the moon itself. And we see also inside this scene, Odin transporting himself away, trying to find out or figuring out exactly where he needs to go. And this is where we see Jane standing in front of the gates of Valhalla, no longer sunken-eyed and riddled with cancer, standing in front of the gates of Valhalla, ready to leave this realm and enter into the land of the honored dead, those that have fought valiantly and died in battle. And Odin just comes yelling at her. It's like, it was you all along. And he starts accosting her, saying how, she turned Asgard against him, which was his own fault. And she hit him with his own hammer, and she's like, well, yeah, I did that. I would do that again. And they started to talk about these things. Then as you see Odin settle down, as she defeated the Mangog, as she saved the Asgardian people, she saved the family that Odin has. If it wasn't for Jane, Freya, Odin, Thor, they would all be dead. She died in glorious battle. She was the one that achieved this. She is ready to stand in the halls of Valhalla, drinking the finest mead. And this is where we open up and we actually see what the interpretation of Valhalla is for Russell Dodderman and Jason Aaron, which looks absolutely fantastic. But the problem is Jane wasn't ready to die. And then we bounce back to the moon where we see the Odinson, we see the healers over the body of Jane Foster trying to recapture any essence of life that she once had. And Sif and Heimdall and everyone, they're like, no, she's gone. And then this cosmic storm comes and is angry in the fact that Jane Foster has left this realm. And Odinson is just super pissed off, and he starts calling down to this goddamn storm. He's like, down here, you bastard cyclone, and he starts pulling in the lightning and the essence of the mother storm and channeling it into the body of Jane Foster, shocking, trying to jumpstart her heart or something along those lines, like a defibrillator. But this is all happening while Jane Foster's spirit, her soul, is talking to Odin at the gates of Valhalla, and then finally, as he's talking about how she could just drink for all eternity the finest of meads, the Valkyries will show you the way to where you will be, but she feels like there's something holding her back. She feels like there's something left for her to give, as she feels this pain from the mother storm that's coursing through her body and the Odinson. Russell Dodderman's art for this is fantastic. The coloring really hits the essence of a lot of these different things, especially when we're talking about the lightning effects and the dimensional travel. It just screams this otherworldly kind of essence, and when you combine that with these phenomenal colors, these rich blues and yellows and oranges, pinks, and all this kind of stuff, it just really is a well put together book that shows us a lot of emotion inside the actual frames, the frame structure, which are not just a simple grid, they're chaos that are surrounding these individual images. And Odin transports himself from Valhalla back to the surface of the moon, puts his hand on his son's shoulder, and he calls out, he says to his son, he says to Thor, you cannot control the powers of the god Tempest. No single god ever could. But lucky for Lady Jane, there are more than one of us here. And as she peers back from the gates of Valhalla, the Valkyries standing there waiting, we see Odin take in the power of the god Tempest. We see Thor take in the power of the god Tempest. And then finally, with this last crackhoom, where this lightning and power and energy courses its way into her body, a small crackle at the corner of her eye, she pops back to life, open again. And this is where we start summarizing the final pieces of Jane Foster's life after Thor. So she wakes up, there's rejoicing, all those kind of things. A few days later, we get back to Asgardia where they're kind of rebuilding everything. You see all these different Asgardians putting back these pieces. Thor's got no arm anymore because the Uru metal arm melted off of his body while he was trying to channel this god Tempest energy. And he walks with Jane as she's already going back to her cancer treatments and those kind of things. Without a hammer to worry about, it's easier for her to focus on kicking Cancer's ass instead of getting her ass kicked while she's fighting things like the Mangog or other beings that she had to take on. And the one big thing is that the Odinson still lacks the kind of confidence that is necessary for him to become a Thor. Because Thor can't die. Regardless of what Thor says, that if it was a worthy death for Thor, it's not the death of Thor. There must always be a Thor. And that's the thing that Jane said when she was on the moon. First off, she hands a piece of Mjolnir, a small fragment of Mjolnir that she just carries in her hand as if it's something normal. And as she drops it into his, it feels so heavy. It carries so much weight. It's no wonder that he would never be able to lift the hammer. But the problem is he always could lift the hammer. It's just that he didn't have the confidence in himself in order to do that. When she says there must always be a Thor, she felt honored to take up the mantle. It was not her appropriating his name, his role. It was with him unable to find that confidence in himself that she took things up, took on that responsibility as that was necessary. There must always be a Thor. And now it is time for Thor to reclaim that title, to show the world what he can do, to show the universe what he can do without a hammer, let alone with Mjolnir. So with this small spark of energy, this small hunk of Uru, this small piece of Mjolnir, he has a few ideas. With the rejoicing done, Odinson calls off looking for dwarves, asking if any of them are blacksmiths, because they're going to make a hammer. Actually, many hammers, as Thori wonders whether they're going to kill dwarves or not. But this is where the story of Jane Foster's Thor ends. She stares out off the precipice into the cosmos, looking at what she could once hold in her hands as she flew through the skies as the mighty Thor, which is no longer going to happen. She might not be dead, she might not be out of this story completely, but no longer is she going to take up the mantle of Thor, and that's going to be left up to the Odinson. It's a decent development. I wish there was a touch more permanence. I think that there was a really strong emotional thread that actually went through this entire arc. That this Death of Mighty Thor arc was poignant in a lot of different ways, and what it does is it closes out the second part of Jason Aaron's Thor run. So he had Thor, God of Thunder, which is his part 1, The Mighty Thor, which is where Jane Foster takes over, which is part 2, and now the new series, which is going to be coming out not in May, but in June, Thor. That is going to be what we're looking for. This is going to be his interpretation of his third part. It's going to be the last arc of Thor before he steps off the book, which I think is going to be really promising. But I want to know what you guys think too, so hit me up in the comments down below and we can start that conversation. As always, if you like what you see, hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe to get more news, reviews, and commentary on comic books, comic book movies, comic book TV shows and games, and anything and everything inside the world of comics.